tell us about this visa controversy that kind of erupted over the Christmas season with the Doge head and some of the Trump followers.
Right. This was a major controversy. And we should remind everyone that the way that social media and the media, mainstream media, has evolved, this stuff does matter. Even though this is largely originating on X, on what used to be called Twitter, it still matters, and it does have to do with the Trump administration. And it started with something in reality, which was Trump appointing his AI advisor, his artificial intelligence advisor, senior advisor, major policy advisor, which his name was Surya Krishman. I'm sure I'm getting his name partially wrong, but he had stated some things that were frankly just against what Trump was promoting in 2016 and what I think a lot of people have voted for. And especially that was removing the caps, the country caps on immigration visas. That bothered a lot of people, and that sparked a debate specifically about the H1B visa program. This is something that a lot of people have been thinking about and has been a concerned with for a long time. Elon Musk came out and said regarding legal immigration, we need to double this number. He says the number of people who are super talented engineers and super motivated in the U.S. is far too low. He says we need to win against China. He says there's this conflict, this economic conflict with China. We need to import many more legal immigrants so that we can win that. And the one and he says it's frankly a matter of if you want America to win or lose. What offended a lot of people was a quote by Vivek Ramaswamy, a long post he made on Twitter, and that really caused this to start a flame war, where he goes on. I think in some ways it was unhinged. In some other ways he was, he has some good points. He critiques American culture. He says the reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over quote-unquote Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit. A key part comes to the word culture, comes down to the word culture. He goes on and talks about, it's kind of odd. He says a culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. And it goes on to advocate for this increase of legal immigration, this decrease of illegal immigration. And some strange figures came out, some unlikely allies came out against this, because of course the core of the America First, the MAGA movement, was skeptical of this. Why are we increasing legal immigration? Nikki Haley came out and says there is nothing wrong with American workers or American culture. All you have to do is look at the border and see how many want what we have. We should be investing and prioritizing in Americans, not foreign workers. In a similar way, you saw other great figures, people that I think have been doing a great job. Jack Posobiec, for example, came out with a good response. Even Fox News, Rachel Campos Duffy came out with a response to this as well, critiquing Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy for advocating this. So we need to sort of break this down. The H1B visa has been a controversy in the MAGA movement for a while. Trump initially, back in 2016, made this statement. He said, Megyn Kelly asked me about highly skilled immigration. The H1B program is neither high skilled nor immigration. These are temporary foreign workers imported from abroad for the explicit purpose of substituting for American workers at lower pay.
Well, first of all, I think, and I know the H1B very well, and it's something that I frankly use, and I shouldn't be allowed to use. We shouldn't have it. Very, very bad for workers. And second of all, I think it's very important to say, well, I'm a businessman, and I have to do what I have to do, and it's sitting there waiting for you, but it's very bad. It's very bad for business in terms of, it's very bad for our workers, and it's unfair for our workers, and we should end it.
Recently, Trump has come out in complete 180. He's come out and supported Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, even making a statement, I've always liked the visas. He says, I always have been in favor of the visas. So in typical Trump fashion, he says, I've always been in favor of this. So
they're the greatest visas ever.
The greatest visas ever, right. So we need to break down further. What exactly are we talking about here? What is an H1B visa? Is this high-skilled workers or is this something else? So here is a graph of the applications and the limit on H1B visas. H1B visas allows people to apply to come to the country. They then enter into a lottery. There is an 85,000 cap and on an annual limit, which is that country cap that we just mentioned. On how many people can enter through this visa alone. There's other visas, but this visa alone. Now, there's many applicants each year. As you see, we have there was 10 times the amount of the actual cap applied. So if you were, so 85,000 people come in from the H1B visa and are accepted. But if you remove that cap, you would 10 times the amount the people that could just simply come in because they would qualify for the application. If you look at the salary amount, this isn't really high skill. Now, look, I grew up middle class, and so I see the number 100,000. That seems like a lot of money even to me, but in the reality of this day and age, $100,000, $75,000 a year is not high skilled, high pay immigration work. It simply is not. And as you see from this graph, many of these applications, and if you go further and see the accepted, there's many of these people are making less than $100,000 a year, less than $75,000 a year that come through this visa program. Now, why is this being done? Well, here we can get a hint before we get looking closer. If, for example, you were hired as a software engineer, an American would make something about $160,000. But if you're from this H-1B visa, of course, you're going to be willing to work for less. If you're coming in from mainly these immigrants are from China and India, they're getting paid for $30,000 less, $129,000. Java developer, median pay, $160,000. H-1B pay, $92,000. So these corporations can save quite a lot of money by just simply importing these people. This did happen with Tesla. It can give us a hint into why Elon Musk might want to do this. As we saw when they had that massive layoff, I think we even talked about this on the show this year or last year, however you want to think about it. They laid off these people. During that time, they applied for about 2,400 H-1B applicants. So I think many of the critics are right to point out this is simply replacing many American workers. So if we break down further the reasons for this, I do think Trump has made a compromise with the establishment, particularly big tech or little tech, however you want to call it. He recently went on during his campaign, the All In podcast, where he talked about stapling green cards to diplomas, saying that foreign students who even have an associate's degree could simply get a green card. There's about 1 million foreign students in the country last time I checked. So you're talking about a lot of additional legal immigrants. And why do the tech companies want this? Well, this is something that's not often talked about, but as everybody who's been not living under a rock for the past 1 or 2 years has known, that the AI developments, it's all the rage. All of these tech companies are racing to find the best, the most competitive AI software, trying to develop it as much as possible. In some ways, it hasn't been working. It hasn't replaced the workers that they initially thought it was. If you remember the panic, everybody was saying, oh, this is going to replace everything. And they've needed actually more workers in pursuit of this AI development, which, as I mentioned earlier, has not been the extreme development they thought it would be. And in order to meet that energy, in order to meet that need, they need to hire low-skilled or medium-skilled workers. And so many of these tech companies don't want to hire Americans. They want to hire people they can pay a lot less money from the outside. So that's the reason why the AI and tech companies are wanting this. Now, we can sort of look big picture. We can see, I know some people are saying, I thought this was Catholic family news. What does this have to do with religion? Well, obviously all these things are connected, but if you look back to what we were saying about J.D. Vance initially, I issued some skepticism, especially in regards to his relations with the tech companies and Donald Trump's relation with especially Peter Thiel, the homosexual big technocrat who's running Palantir and many of these AI companies. And if you read J.D. Vance's big book, Hillbilly Elegy, he talks about, and this is really, it's become a big movement in MAGA, or at least it's trying to supplant what America First was all about. He does point to a real concern, which is there is a lot of Americans who are working low paying jobs. They had a miserable education. They're in communities that are overrun with drugs and aren't bound by anything because nobody goes to church anymore. Um, and he says, look, all these people need to do is they really need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, take on personal responsibility. Now, one thing I pointed out at the time was that this is kind of refusing to look at the root cause of all of this, which is obviously the border crisis. You have 10 million illegal immigrants have entered into the United States over the past 4 years alone. But you also have people who can't get Native Americans, native born Americans, aren't able to get higher education to work those higher skilled jobs because of the DEI practices. So, what's their solution? I think JD Vance really, I don't think he really provided a reasonable solution in his book, but the people he's aligned himself with, the big tech companies, are simply saying, well, the United States needs to win this economic battle with these other countries. And in order to do that, we need to just import people. People are just a matter of numbers. It's how can we make money? Well, we look to the people who can make us the money at the lowest price. What's the Catholic solution to this? Why is that wrong? Well, each person is, as even Plato said in his Republic, people are born with different gifts. Not everybody was meant to be like JD Vance and go pull himself up by his bootstraps and go to Yale. People are born with physical gifts, intellectual gifts, and the state, the society, needs to be able to provide the rights for everyone in that society. And rights correspond to duties, and that has to do with being able to provide for your family, which is the primary unit of society, being able to worship God, and also being able to receive an education to better your life, live in a cultured society. Immigration is, just practically speaking, stopping Americans from being able to pursue those rights. And the country of the United States is not putting Americans first. It's putting foreigners first and these big companies first instead of its own people. And that's a major problem. The last thing I'll say, and I'll give it over to you, Brian, is the reason why this has to do with Catholicism is this really does give us an example of what happens when a country no longer has anything to bind itself together. If you read Genesis, for example, what makes up a people is its rituals and its sacrifices. That's what made you an Israelite. It's what made you all these various tribes that were around Israel. That's why God commanded Joshua to go attack and destroy these neighboring tribes, because their ritual, what defined them, was human sacrifice and various immoral practices. And the fact that the Catholic Church has abandoned this normalized ritualistic sacrifice that we have with the traditional Latin Mass, and the fact that all of these different liberal societies have said we have no need for a common ritualistic practice, it's going to lead to calamity. It's going to end up with this societal malaise where nobody ends up knowing what they're doing, and you end up just viewing people as numbers, as these big companies are doing. So I think the solution is we have to put Americans first. We have to really have a deep conversation about real culture, what binds us together. And I think the answer to that is Catholicism. But what do you think about all this, Brian? What do you think the Trump movement can survive this sort of schism?
I think it can survive, but it shows that this is a coalition that is sort of papered over some deep cracks that are going to keep emerging, I think, from time to time, because as we've admitted, it is not built on the social doctrine of Christ the King, although it is more favorable to it, is sort of more aligned to it than what we've had. It is certainly not built on that foundation, and so cracks will appear. But there's one other angle I want to focus on, in addition to everything you said, which I agree with, and that is where the Catholic would intervene is on the theory of just price and just wage that you did allude to. And it's unfortunate, we were trying to get an economic roundtable video discussion before Christmas. Hopefully in 2025 we can get that together, because I think it's more needed now than ever. But one of the important doctrines of the Catholic Church is that people are to be paid a just wage. One of the sins crying to heaven for vengeance is the denial of workers of their just wage. And the just wage has got two components. One, that you pay a fair wage for the work done, right? That the exchange of services for the wage is proportionate. and two, that you pay a wage for a person to be able to support their family, if it's a full-time permanent job, etc. Now, what's interesting about that is this whole thing ignores those Catholic principles, because classical liberalism's theory is you pay as little as you can. Like whatever the market will bear is morally justified. And so this is really one of the major issues with the illegal immigration, but it's the same issue with this legal immigration you're talking about. With the illegals, it's why do companies love it? We can pay poor, unskilled workers less than we pay Americans because we can hold their immigration status over their head. Look, essentially, that's what companies have been doing. They're hiring illegals, saying, look, we can turn you in at any moment, so we're going to take advantage of you. That's totally immoral. But this is essentially the same thing on a more sophisticated level, right? You want to come live in our country? Well, we're going to dangle this, again, this temporary visa to let you come here, which we can sort of kick you out at any time, being the company, when we say we don't need you. And therefore, we're going to pay you 20, 30, 40% less. Now, clearly not a just wage if the work is worth this much, but this is how St. Thomas would explain it. You can never lower the wage based on the need of the other party. So the work is worth this much, but because you're desperate and I can take an advantage of you, I'm going to pay you less, always indicates an injustice going on. And, that's really what's wrong with this. And that's, it exposes at the root of some of the Trump coalition, this classical liberal economic philosophy that is still lurking there.
Yeah, great points completely. And I think this is something everybody really needs to realize and be cautious of, that just because the left is communist and socialist doesn't mean we take the opposite excess, which is this crony capitalism, this laissez-faire capitalism that destroys a people group. It has at its root a similar error to Marxism, which is seeing that instead of viewing people as people that need to come back to God, people made in the image of God, and they have these duties that the state needs to provide the right to do. Instead, it views people just as an economic unit. That's what Marx said. People are economic units. In history, it's simply materialism. And we have to get back to viewing people as the full human person and having certain rights and duties that correspond to that. Last thing I'll say is, if you're interested in any of these things, to our audience, we have a conference that's going to be talking a lot about this on March 1st and March 2nd. This is going to be a huge, honestly, we're one of the only groups talking about this kind of stuff in depth. And we're going to be doing that here at this conference. You're going to be able to meet with people in a truly Catholic environment. And you can go to CatholicFamilyNews.com. We have that 2025 conference at the top, or you can just go to the link there we have on the screen. Use that QR code. It's going to be near Orlando, Florida, March 1st, March 2nd. That's where a lot of this stuff we're going to be talking about. Father Fahey got some great speakers going on as well. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a great time. Again, we're the only people really talking about this stuff in a fully traditional Catholic manner that gets all of the aspects that need to be expounded on. So go over to CatholicFamilyNews.com. It's going to be a great time.
Definitely. Really encourage it. We're less than 60 days to the conference, and we really need people to sign up. I know it's easy to, particularly around the holidays, put things off, but we really need to get our numbers down and know what's coming, and reserve things with the hotel. The room rates, we got incredible room rates for Orlando, which is a big tourist area. Some of the rooms, and they're all suites. You can have, they're kitchenettes and living rooms under $100, which is an incredible room rate. You can come before and stay even after the conference at that rate. We have some great speakers who are going to be there. Father Matthew Hanos, Benedictine, Dr. John Rao, Father Michael McMahon, Christopher Ferrara, and others. So really, this is the agenda of Christ the King, right? Donald Trump's agenda, although better, and although we voted for it to support it, is a shadow of the real plan for peace, right? We all want to end these foreign wars. The real plan for peace was that laid out by Father Dennis Fahey in his writings in the early 20th century on the 6-point plan of Christ for peace and how the devil has been working to undermine it. And part of it, I'll be addressing some of these economic issues. Father McMahon is going to talk about the reign of Christ the King, the role of the Catholic Church. We really are going to go through all of these 6 points in detail. And I think you're right. Nobody is willing to touch this topic. This is really the heart of the matter. And a lot of these other quasi, you know, uh, traditionalist leaning groups are dancing around it, but don't really want to get into some of these hard hitting issues. And this is, I think, the only conference that will do it. So we'd love to see you there. Please make it a New Year's resolution to sign up as soon as possible.
Definitely. We hope to see you there.